Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to At 6 online support program. Textbook Biology, page 114 up to 121, unit 16, that is Man and His Environment, and the topic is components of ecosystem and biogeochemical cycles. Objectives. By the end of the lesson, you will be able to understand components of ecosystem and describe biogeochemical cycles. Components of ecosystem. Before starting the components of ecosystem, we will define the term ecosystem. So the ecosystem can be defined as the community of the group of living organisms that live in and interact with each other in specific environment. In simple words, we can say that the interaction of organism with their environment is known as ecosystem. Now coming towards the component. The ecosystem comprises of two basic components, that is biotic and abiotic components. Now first we will define abiotic components, that is the non-living part of the environment. This is known as abiotic component. For example, light, air, water, soil, these are the non-living part of the environment. Now, coming towards the definition of biotic component, this can be defined as the living part of the environment. So, the living part of the environment is known as biotic component, which can be producer, that is plants, consumers, and decomposers. Now, coming towards the first biotic component, that is producer. So the producer form the base of the ecosystem. They are also known as autotrophs, which mean they can prepare their own food. For example, plants, algae, and photosynthetic bacteria. It means that the producer are independent, they can prepare their own food, and all the animals or all the consumers are totally dependent upon the producer for the food. Now coming towards the aquatic environment. So producers here may be floating photosynthetic organisms commonly known as phytoplankton and shallow water rooted plants. So the second biotic component is known as consumer. They are known as consumer because they consume food, they do not prepare their own food, and they are totally dependent upon the plants for the food. The examples of consumer include animals, fungi, protozoans, and many of the bacteria. And these animals, the animals are the major consumers of the ecosystem. The consumer can be further classified as herbivores, carnivores. So the examples of the herbivores include cattle, deer, rabbit, grasshopper, etc. feed on the plants. Now we will discuss the carnivores and herbivores further in detail. So the herbivore feed on the plants in or called as the primary consumers, for example cattle, rabbit, etc. And the carnivore feed on the other animals. Now here we will discuss the three types of the carnivore, that is the primary carnivore, secondary carnivores, and the tertiary carnivore. Now coming towards the primary carnivore, they are they are also known as the secondary consumer because they feeds on the herbivore. Examples of the primary carnivore includes fox, fish, and snake, etc. Secondary carnivore are also known as the tertiary consumer and they feed upon the primary carnivore. Examples include wolf and owl. The tertiary carnivore feed on the secondary carnivore. They are also called as a top carnivore because they are not eaten by any other organisms. Example of the tertiary carnivore includes lion, tiger, etc. Now coming towards the next biotic component, that is known as the decomposer. So first we will define decomposers. that is, the organisms that break down the complex organic compounds of the dead matter, that may be of plants and animals, to these simple compounds. So, for this purpose, decomposers secrete digestive enzymes onto the dead plants and animals to digest the organic material. Once when the digestion completes, the decomposer absorbs the products for their own use, and the remaining substance are added to the environment. For example, this includes bacteria and the fungi. So also remember that the minerals which are released by the decomposer can also be used as a nutrients by the producer, by the plants, so they can get better growth and yield. So this diagram shows that we have first producers which are eaten by the herbivore. The herbivore is eaten by the primary carnivore. The primary carnivore is eaten by the secondary carnivore. The secondary carnivore is eaten by the tertiary carnivore. And at last, the decomposer decomposes all these organisms and release the beneficial nutrients to the environment. Biogeochemical cycle. This can be defined as the cyclic pathway through which the material moves from the environment to the organisms and back to the environment. It means that the materials are continuously recycled between the organisms and their environment. Here we will discuss the carbon cycle and the nitrogen cycle as an example of biogeochemical cycle. So the first example of biogeochemical cycle is carbon cycle. Before starting the carbon cycle, we will first discuss some features of the carbon. So this is the principal building block of many kind of biomolecule, like for example lipids and carbohydrates. And in nature, it is present as a graphite and a diamond. In atmosphere, it is present in the form of carbon dioxide. So the major source of carbon for the living world is carbon dioxide present in the atmosphere and water. Peat, coal, natural gas, petroleum, fossil fuel, they also contain the carbon, and the carbonate of the earth crust also give rise to carbon dioxide. So these are all the sources of the carbon. Carbon cycle is a perfect cycle because the carbon is returned to the atmosphere as soon as it is removed. So now we will discuss the carbon cycle in detail. So for the fixing of the carbon from the atmosphere into the living world, the process of photosynthesis is responsible. The plants take in the carbon dioxide and convert it into organic compounds, and in this way the carbon becomes the part of the body of the producer. Now this carbon gets a chance to enter into the food chain and is passed to the herbivores, carnivores and decomposer. Secondly, remember that this process is common to both land plants and aquatic plants. And by the respiration of the plants and animals on land as well as in water, the process of respiration results in the release of the carbon dioxide back to the environment. And by the decomposition of the dead bodies, it means when these animals and plants get die, so the decomposition of the dead bodies and organic waste by the decomposer also release CO2 to the environment. Secondly, burning of wood and fossil fuel also add large amount of CO2 into the atmosphere. The second biogeochemical cycle is the nitrogen cycle. Before starting the nitrogen cycle in detail, we will first discuss some important features of the nitrogen. So this is an important component of many biomolecule like carbon. So the biomolecule which consists of the nitrogen is protein and nucleic acid, that is DNA and RNA. So we have atmosphere. In atmosphere, the nitrogen is present in free form, and we have about 78% of the nitrogen in our atmosphere. But the problem is that the living organism cannot utilize this gaseous nitrogen directly from the atmosphere. It has to be converted into some other forms to be utilized by the plants and animal. But the nitrogen fixing bacteria is an organism that fix the nitrogen directly from the atmosphere, or it can pick the nitrogen, the gaseous nitrogen, directly from the environment. So the nitrogen cycle involves several stages which can be, now we will discuss it in detail. Now we will discuss the nitrogen cycle in detail. This can be completed into 3 steps. The first is formation of nitrates, second is assimilation, and the third is denitrification. So first we will discuss formation of nitrates. Nitrate is basically the simple form of the nitrogen. As I told you before, that nitrogen has to be converted into some simple form. So it is converted into simpler forms. So the formation of nitrates, it can be done in the following ways. The first is nitrogen fixation. The nitrogen fixation can be defined as the conversion of the nitrogen base into nitrates is called nitrogen fixation. That means that the nitrogen is converted into its simpler form. So the nitrogen fixation can be done in the following ways. At first, the thunderstorm and lightning convert the atmospheric nitrogen into the oxides of the nitrogen, and these oxides combine with the water molecule present in the atmosphere and converts into nitrous and nitric acid, and these acid in turn combines with the salts to form nitrates. This is called atmospheric nitrogen fixation, that is done naturally. Actually, we need nitrates, so these all mechanisms are just to get nitrate, so they can be easily utilized by the animals and plants. The second one is a biological nitrogen fixation. So this can be done by the bacteria, by the biological bacteria, which can live as a symbionts, and some are free living. They fix the nitrogen into the nitrate, and they have the ability to um, fix the nitrogen directly from the atmosphere. So symbiotic bacteria includes the example of the rhizobium, and the free living are the cyanobacteria and the blue-green algae. This can be also done by the in the industries, and the industrial nitrogen fixation. The hydrogen is combined with the atmospheric nitrogen at high pressure. This results in the formation of the ammonia, and this ammonia is converted into ammonium nitrate, which is then further processed to get the nitrates. The second way of getting nitrates is the ammonification and nitrification. Here you can see the ammonification and the nitrification. So ammonification can be defined as the breakdown of the dead organisms and nitrogenous waste to ammonia. When these plants and animals get die, so the proteins of these dead organisms and plants are decomposed and ammonia is released. This can be done by the ammonifying bacteria. Once when the ammonia forms, it is converted into nitrites and nitrates, which are the simple form of the nitrogen. First, the ammonia is converted into nitrites by the nitrosomonas, and then these nitrites are converted by the nitrobacter into the nitrates. These nitrates are then absorbed by the plants, and this process is known as the assimilation. That is the absorption of these nitrates by the plants. And these plants utilizes these nitrates for the formation of the proteins. Now, when animal consume these plants, automatically the nitrates become the part, or the nitrogen becomes the part of these animals. So assimilation can be defined as the utilization of the nitrates by the organism is called assimilation. Again, when these plants and animals die, again the ammonifying bacteria act on these dead organisms and they again release the ammonia, which is then converted into nitrites and nitrates. So this is a cyclic form. That is how we call it a cycle. Now denitrification, that is also a biological process, and the denitrifying bacteria act on these nitrates and nitrites and they release the nitrogen back to the environment. But the excess denitrification is also not good as it reduces the soil fertility and stimulated by the water logging, lack of irrigation and accumulation of organic matter in the soil. In simple words, we can say that the nitrate is suitable for the soil quality, for the better growth of the plant. So excess denitrification can reduce the soil quality and soil fertility. So this was all about the nitrogen cycle.